So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. And I think this is one of the most awaited interviews that at least I have been wanting to have a chat for a very, very long time. And it couldn't have come at a better time. I think we are at the International Women's Day 2021. And we have Radhika with us, who's probably does not need a formal introduction, but I'm going to try and attempt sharing with all of you about her, which I think is really differentiated, sets her apart to be someone very, very relevant and talking about this topic especially. So obviously she's the CEO for Edelweiss Asset Management's India business. And what I feel is that she's also beyond that, she's resetting the template for a modern day CEO. I think a CEO for the digital world, for also a new, I would say, an avatar in the asset management business. What I describe as one of my favorite books, Small is Beautiful. I think for an industry that has been obsessed with scale and AUM, she's obviously trying to set the new template and charting out a growth path that is different from what has been usually followed. Also, I think I'm a big fan of Venn diagrams. So when I was looking at Radhika, I think she's an exemplary human being from multiple perspectives for us to be having this discussion. One is, of course, that she's a successful woman. She's a successful lady. Two, she's somebody who's in financial services. So that's the two rings interjecting. And also that I think she's been an entrepreneur. And why I feel that is very, very important. In golden days, people would send people on training. I think the mantra for new age is that, leaders have to have an entrepreneurial stint. Now, whether it is inside the firm, outside the firm, again, I have different opinions, and that is for another day. But fact of the matter is that I think it is very much required for the new age CEO. And there are many more Venn diagrams which make her unique and special. She was born with a little bit of a deformity, but I think she's one person I know who's not let her come in the way and used it to her advantage rather. Very, very successfully. And I know while it may sound simple, but I'm sure she would have had to overcome lots, and we will probably chat about that. The other very unique thing that I feel is a very essential metric for success is, I think, travel. And I would definitely like to draw her thoughts on that. And she's very, very well traveled globally. And I think that, to my mind, also sets her apart in terms of her ability to look at things and doing it differently, what she does. So a very long intro, but I still don't think it does justice, but to introducing somebody like Radhika. But welcome, Radhika, and thank you so very much for sparing the time to have a chat with us today.
No, thanks, Samant. I'm actually really excited, and I have to compliment you on your intro. I always get very scared of these intros because what people end up doing is they read the bio of me that's on the website, and I feel like they read the resume of someone very scary. So you made it a lot more human, and that's very nice. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that is something that people any which ways have the option of going and reading up. But I thought the idea is to bring the real you out, and the intent of this chat is that they could relate with what we are discussing and take back stuff that is day to day can help them do better. So can I start by maybe asking you about the fact that whatever setbacks and disadvantages that you've had starting out, obviously I'm sure there were physical, mental, how did you approach them? I'm sure in the beginning you always feel, oh, this is a race and I am maybe starting a little back from everybody else. How did you approach that challenge? Because most of us find ourselves in our own races disadvantaged in a certain way.
I think that's a really interesting question. And incidentally, the theme of International Women's Day this year is also choose to challenge. So you kind of brought up sort of the point on challenge. I don't think there's any individual in the world who doesn't have challenges. Man, woman, whatever, rich, poor, everybody has their set of challenges. And quite frankly, I think we live in a world that expects us to be perfect, right? I remember going to college and being trained that if an interviewer asks you this question, what is your weakness? First thing you say something like dark chocolate or something like, really funny, because of course nobody admits any weakness, right?
Yeah,
And then you come up with a second weakness that is like, I work too hard. It's like a strength that's masquerading as a
absolutely.
weakness. So that's how we've been trained to be brought up. And I mean, well, I was the same, right? But I think, and the last 2 3 years have been really transformative. I give credit to a mentor, Captain Raghu Raman, for this. But I mean, he talked about the fact that all of us have challenges, and when you accept those challenges and accept them not just privately but publicly and share them with the world, you actually become a real human person, because no one really cares about Radhika, the CEO, right? There are hundreds and thousands of CEOs all over the world, and ultimately it's a label, right? It's a designation. It doesn't matter. It's a role I play. But I have a neck issue. Someone else has a head issue. Someone else has a cheek issue. Someone else has a fake, issue complex about the family background they came
Yeah,
from. All
yeah,
of us have issues.
absolutely, absolutely.
When you accept those issues and choose to say, okay, here I have weaknesses, this is what they are, but you know what, all of us do, and I'm still awesome besides that, define
Absolutely.
beyond. I think then the world sees you as you see yourself. I really believe the world is a mirror. They see you as you see yourself.
So tell me that how did you come into the world of finance from a professional standpoint? How did you choose this to be your calling? Was it by accident, or some people say when I was small I wanted to become this and so on and so forth. But how did it happen to you?
Okay, so I am not one of those kids. I'll give you a straight answer to this question. I often get asked, "Did you imagine you'd be here?" Right? All
Yeah,
this kind of thing. Like, okay, I'm going to do a Miss India like thing. Oh no, I never imagined I would be here. So there's truth and not truth. I am born into a family where largely the women have been teachers, and my other side of the family has been in government. I'm probably the first one working a corporate job. So forget finance. I think for me to study abroad and do like the corporate thing was a big deal. For years and years, my father thought it was a big disappointment that I didn't do UPSC. Like, I mean, he's forgiven me about 4 years ago for that. So no, I didn't expect that I would do finance. However, back to the Miss India question, I was always very ambitious as a kid. And so I don't want to go out and say, oh, I never thought I'd be here. I was a hardworking kid. I was an ambitious kid. And I'm saying this on the show because I just think little girls in India are not taught to have ambition, or even big girls, or celebrate ambition. So I wanted to be the best, even at a school project. But was it finance? No. I was, like many students, good at math, economics, etc. I also like literature, and I kind of wandered my way into Wharton, and then ended up in finance and happened to like it.
yeah.
Like many people's marriages, my career is an arranged marriage that seems to be working out quite okay.
That, no, I think this led me to another perspective question that I had for you, and I thought, and you mentioned about it. Maybe it is thousands of years of conditioning, right? There are certain things that are almost expected, right? It's a habit that this will be done by the lady of the house, right? And this will be done by the man of the house. Obviously, I would think last 20, 30 years, a lot has changed. One can argue about the pace of that change and can it be faster and so on and so forth. But what are your thoughts about that whole change per se, right? We just had a all women's Air India crew flying over the Atlantic and so on and so forth. So there is physically actually nothing that it has been proven now that a lady or a woman cannot achieve. But how do you see this whole thing playing out, the whole gender equality issue?
So we have made progress, but obviously there's miles to go. The ideal scenario is 50-50. I think, there are women in every field, especially young women, sort of shattering myths now, whether it's the Air India crew or whether it's so many of our athletes, or
Right.
actually even just beyond India, so many of the women leading nations so beautifully through this pandemic.
Correct.
I think there are, in fact, I think that's the most beautiful memory of COVID is the power of women leadership. So I think there are in individual pockets tremendous excellence, and there's so many inspirational stories out there. But they are pockets, and it's not enough. I look at my own industry, and I talk to friends who are CEOs in many different industries, and it's one or two girls out there. I think that number needs to shift and become systemic. The thing that I think has changed from my mother's generation, however, and my grandmother's generation is women are becoming less apologetic about being ambitious. Younger girls are wanting to do more with their careers. And the typical myth that still propagates my office and many offices, when a woman has a kid, people think, "Acha, ye to wapas nahi aayegi, she's never going to come back." I can tell you, I have many women in the mid 30s and they're awesome. All of them come back. So all of them are taking their careers, and I'm not judging anyone who doesn't, but all of them are coming back. They want to get better. They want to build their personal brand. They want to do really well at work. So I think that shift is at least happening.
Absolutely. I mean, just a small anecdote from our side. Uh, by a matter of chance, we were looking for somebody as a head of finance. We are a very small team, a startup, and we needed somebody who could wear many hats. And this lady who's a chartered accountant used to work with, a very large international bank, had taken a sabbatical and she wanted to join back. And as a matter of conversation, it worked out that she had a very small kid, was not sure she wants to come back fully or not. So we did a half day arrangement with her. And I have said this to many, many, many people. She is the most productive colleague that we have. She is in the office at 9, and I'm sure she'll be watching this interview later. She is a lady on mission because she knows she has to leave by 1. She gets more accomplished in those 4 hours that all of us put together do. So I think hats off to that. So it is not so much about, and especially I think also what has changed is today's format allows you to practice all this, right? You don't have to do this. And with COVID now, this office business is also kind of,
I
that.
think we are going to be the biggest beneficiaries
Yeah.
of this COVID and work from home world. I think the whole concept of caregiving and maternity, etc., and being at home. I mean, I have had girls who have delivered babies, and 6, 7 days later, they're plugging into the office, right? Because you're not taking care of the kid all the time. You're doing things, right?
Absolutely.
And work from home just makes those boundaries obsolete. I think even friends who own family businesses who were very anti work from home, कि कैसे employee work from home karega, their minds have opened up to that. So I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to leverage the talent of women like you did, and not just in metropolitan and urban India, but also in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. I
Absolutely.
mean,
Absolutely.
you can't hire a graphic designer out of some tier 3 city
Yeah.
because she's
Yeah.
awesome.
So Radhika, let me draw your thoughts on. There's been a lot of talk about this, gender equality and stuff like that, and let me draw you to something that both of us, in terms of our businesses, and believe in. How important is financial independence to women's independence? I mean, as a part of that overall concept of women's independence, how important is financial independence?
Oh, yeah, I don't think any kind of independence is complete without financial independence. I think if you want the freedom to make what is independence? Independence is the freedom to make your own choices. And I think a lot of choices end up being monetary. And I always tell women this, and it doesn't matter whether you're earning, whether you're a student, or whether you're working, earning a big income, a small income, money is not a job you should outsource. And I think there are many reasons, Samant, not to outsource it. One is that it's not that hard. I mean, as you said, women can do a ton of things, right? We can manage countries, we can manage homes, we can bring up kids, we can do jobs. Smriti Irani said this. I mean, if you can do all this, you think you can't manage money, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of it's like, hey. And I think courtesy you guys and so many resources out there, it's not that difficult in any case. So one, it's not that difficult. Second is that life is really uncertain. And I hear terrible stories of what happens after tough divorces or
Yeah,
husbands. But life is just uncertain. I mean, I hate to sound morbid, but life is uncertain,
yeah,
and you should have control of finances. And the third is that when you get into this, and I'll give you my own example. I mean, I've made a lot of stupid money mistakes, but the one thing that I did do is I started saving early and I started investing early. And as I said, I've made a lot of stupid mistakes. But I was 24 when I wanted to start my entrepreneurial journey and move back to India, and it required quite a bit of capital. I could make that decision because I had the capital and I didn't need to ask my father and father-in-law and X and Y and Z कि मैं ये करूँ या ना करूँ. So I think it gives you sort of a plug to pursue your dreams if you're financially confident.
and just a small snippet question, added to that. Do you also feel that when women become financially independent or start earning, they are able to take better decisions and they are looked at differently by people around in the ecosystem?
I think so, and I think they take better decisions for the family because ultimately, and studies have shown this, women don't take decisions just for themselves. They take consumption decisions, they take investment decisions, and they take goal decisions for the family. And I think in the context of a family unit, when decisions are made together, those decisions are a lot more wholesome. So I think that's the contribution. I think when you make a woman financially independent, you actually help the family a lot. There are lots of cases, and I'm sure you've heard a fair share of them in COVID, where the primary breadwinner of the house has lost a job or is going through a financial crisis. COVID has also shown you that times are uncertain. There are so many stories of people who've lost jobs, gone through financial troubles. And I think when the woman of the house is financially literate, financially involved, you really come together as partners to make better financial decisions for the family.
Right.
Ultimately, when you have a woman who's financially savvy, she's a better partner, and two minds is always better than one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So Radhika, do you remember when you started working? What is it? Maybe a small nudge from parents or a friend or anything that you read. What put you on this path? You mentioned you started saving early, investing early. What was that thing which kind of, nudged you or awakened you towards this path, if you remember?
Okay, so firstly, I think I started earning in 2005. Like 5 and 6, I was just lazy, and I kept my money in a savings account in the US, which is ridiculous, right? I was just too busy, and I was an international student trying to figure out life in the US, and I didn't even know how to do the paperwork. I mean, I just didn't know any of it. My then husband and I, we both worked in asset management businesses. So at some point, we just said, listen, we need to get this. And our firms made it very easy. So I think I started it a few years later than I should. And I misallocated terribly, which we can talk about separately. But I think it was just time and a little bit of sort of me and my husband pushing ourselves and the ecosystem around us kind of pushing ourselves.
Anything that, let's say, there is also this new awakening that is happening now, which is about retirement, right? So although not early enough, but I think earlier there was no concept of saving for retirement. At least our parents' generation, I think they were very, very well covered if they were in government service, both from their retirement benefits as well as healthcare and so on and so forth. I think with the kind of inflation that we have seen, I think two biggest inflations that we have been seeing is on healthcare and on education. So there is some level of, I think, awareness about people to start saving or building corpuses towards both. What are you seeing and how have you seen this entire change manifest?
So I think retirement in today's generation becomes important for a couple of reasons that are different from my father's generation. One, my father was a government servant, right? So he has a pension and he has PF and all that stuff. That stuff doesn't exist now for a lot of us. The second is our generation wants to retire earlier. I mean, it's very common to see people, at least in my industry, wanting to retire at 45, 50, 55. And the demands on lifestyle that we make of ourselves, it's very hard to downgrade lifestyle. So I think retirement becomes very, very important in our context. And I don't think retirement can be something that you rely on your children or anybody. I mean, I guess the word of the last year was Atmanirbhar. And
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately retirement is about Atmanirbhar. I think the important thing with retirement is that you don't start planning for retirement once you start retiring. I mean, I saw this with my parents growing up. Even though they knew my dad had a pension, like the retirement word was a very big part of our psyche. And from 40, they started planning for retirement
Wow.
because they knew my dad had a pension. You know, the lifestyle demands, he was ambassador of India. I mean, lifestyles were that way. And they were very keen that, whatever happens after retirement, their lifestyle should not
Not
fall.
fall. Yeah.
And I've actually seen that. I mean, they were more conservative spending in their government service days than they are now. And it's because they plan thoughtfully for retirement.
I just want to also talk about another very interesting thing you talked about, which is about the role of spouse, right? You mentioned about. So tell us a little bit more as to how do you, as you and your partner, spouse, how do you approach this whole concept of, planning, so to say? Very often one also hears that, oh, budget banana chahiye and, stuff like that. But sometimes you feel that everything is going fine, we know how much money we spend, and so how do you guys approach it? I mean, just as a suggestion for.
I share our thoughts on our situations, but I'll also say that each couple's situation is very, very different. Since we are a double income household with no kids right now, and we don't have dependent parents, I think the story and planning would be very, very different if you did. So I always say, firstly, that personal finance is personal, and while you can always be inspired or learn something from someone's story, the personal finance is very, very important. I think before how we approach our finances, I think one approaches one's marriage with a lot of sense of equality and respect. And that's very, very important. And I think we apply that principle to our finances. Both of us are, earning and we're very, very privileged. And we have set out an investment policy statement. I actually ask a lot of couples to make that. And in that, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about what scares us financially, what doesn't scare us, what mistakes we've made in the past. We talk about the fact that in our case, our careers are very volatile because we both work for financial services firms. So we're like a levered bet on markets, right? If one of us was a doctor, it would be kind of different. And we have this in a document. We talk about what fund houses we would like to invest in, what fund houses make us uncomfortable, what schemes. So it's kind of our entire philosophy put into a couple of pages document. And it really helps us because, and we're conservative investors, in times when markets are crazy, we don't go ask ourselves, "Acha yaar, maine zyada equity kyun nahi kiya?" Because we have that document and guide to refer to. And then we look at our portfolio once a quarter. I mean, we send it once a month to each other, but we actually sit down and do a review together once a quarter. And that works really, really nicely. And, so that's what we do. I think the documenting of the policy has worked really nicely for us. And I highly recommend all couples do it because it just makes it not emotional.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And when we do some of the review calls, and a lot of our customers are young customers, first time customers, and we have a very high focus around goals, right? To
Yeah.
say that everything should be around goals. And we tell them, actually, in spite of being a digital platform, we tell them, why don't you just take a plain piece of paper and make two lists? What do you need and what do you want? What you make a long list and try and put down what is a need and a want. And then, because I would want everything, I want a bike, I want a fancy sports car,
Exactly.
and I want a family second home, a vacation home, and I want a vacation. And I think when the moment of truth is when you put this list against your income and you see that, buddy, this is not going to happen. So I think you uh, nailed it. I think just putting the document in front of you, and just putting down the priorities. And if you do that as a couple, then you're looking at things from a family perspective and defining.
For a document, those quarterly conversations are very easy. The
Yeah.
other thing we've realized is we tend to, and maybe this is my conservative and risk manager mindset at heart, we tend to budget a little conservatively. Like I remember we had sold Forefront Capital 5 years ago, and we were deciding to buy a house. And part of that would be funded by the sale of equity, and part of that was home loan. And people keep saying, "Oh, you can do this," and incomes will grow 5 times, and Edelweiss ESOP will do this, etc. we always budget for average outcomes. And that would be something in this bull market I kind of want to emphasize for people, that a lot of things go wrong in finance when your expectations are way off from reality. Just assume equity will grow at 10%. Now, whatever my bonuses have grown at, we budgeted 50% of that. And I
Right.
think that made life easy, because when we went through a correction, we never felt a penny of financial stress. And that was really important. We never looked at our portfolio in March. So I think financial freedom is also being free of worries.
So, Radhika, it's very apt that I ask you this and seek your advice on this one. We started our journey at Sqrrl in 2017. And when we looked at the numbers on the platform 1 year hence, I still remember we had 95% male, 5% female in 2017. And then we obviously started to change our communication, our marketing strategy, our targeting strategies, and so on and so forth. That number has now reached 84-16, right?
Not
Okay. But I think, and it is not for Sqrrl, I think the larger question is for all of us, as how do we take that number closer to 50? Right? How do we get that number improved? So, what are your thoughts on that? How can we encourage more ladies, more women, more youngsters who are very, very feisty, and I kind of speak to a lot of them. They are very independent in their thought process. They have very clear ideas of what they want to do, what they don't want to do. But money is a subject they often feel is not high on their priority list. How do we kind of get this a little nudged up in the priority order?
Okay, so I think I probably will answer this question less as a CEO of an asset management firm and maybe as a young woman. I don't know if I qualify as a young woman anymore, but I'll answer that as a consumer.
Yeah, sure.
And my consumer take on this is, especially in a woman's context, I feel financial communication, and we are trying to do some things to change this, is very jargonized and it becomes very inaccessible. There is too much talk, with due respect to Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and all this stuff. And with due respect to all of that, it doesn't appeal to my sensibility as an Indian woman just trying to work and figuring out what will money do for me. I think communication needs to become, the language of communication needs to become a lot more accessible. For many years, finance, and I've had women tell me this, finance, and I felt this earlier in my career, finance has been portrayed as, oh, if you are an investment professional, you're going to be sitting and talking stocks all day and you're going to be like this abnormal nerd. And someone wrote an article, oh, bankers are people who go to pubs. I mean, really, come on. Like, half the country's banks were run by women, and I don't think they were hanging out at pubs. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So it's been, and the Bloomberg terminals, etc., and you're reading valuation books. That's not what this business is.
Yeah.
And I think financial communication has to change to be a lot more accessible. One is, I think a lot more Indian narratives have to, and this is something that I've been fighting for the longest time. You have to talk to Indians in an Indian language. I think Bollywood learned that and has done that really well. I mean, small town stories and biopics sell in this country for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So we started doing a podcast series. Our most successful podcasts are actually in Hindi, and they are either Kabir's Dohanomics or Ramayana. So, I mean, what do I tell you?
Yeah.
The second, even with young people, the visual language of money has to change to become a lot more interesting and appealing. And what will this do for me? Again, one of the things that we started doing that turned wildly popular, which we didn't expect, is topicals. I mean, Amul has got this dead right. So we started doing topicals at Edelweiss AMC that have become incredibly popular. In fact, people now call us and say, you're not doing enough of them. So I think you need to change the language of communication to become a lot more accessible.
Absolutely. Very, very well put. Very aptly put. So last bit, Radhika, thanks for sparing so much time, but a little more pearls from you. One, if you could share from with all of us, maybe a mistake that was made, which became a big lesson and could serve as a example to the viewers. And the last part is maybe a tip or a secret sauce that you would want to leave with, let's say, a young 28 something or a 30 something who's just starting her career, maybe as a freelancer or just picked up a job. So if you could, give these two tips to
Okay.
listeners.
I'll share one old story and one new one, and one financial and one non-financial.
Sure.
I'll share is financial. I've said it again and again. Early in my career, the first investments I made were like 100% equity, Samant, and this was 2006. And it was such a disaster. And the reason I did it is because I listened to everyone who said, 100 minus your age. And I just didn't realize this whole thing about personal finance being personal. And then 2008 happened, and I was working for a company whose assets halved, whose returns were all negative, bonuses went dying. My husband worked for Goldman. You know what happened to Goldman stock? And that's when we made this realization that, listen, we're just like a levered bet on the Nifty. So we have to be very conservative. I think after I turned to asset allocation after that, I have never been sort of worried about finances in life. I've been very comfortable. So following my own advice, I think has been important. And since you asked for tip, it actually is kind of related to the first thing. I think, being tremendously authentic in your journey and in your career and in your money journey, by the way, is really important. I'll share you one interesting example from last year, because there's this chat going on social media about how especially women have this feeling that they're frauds in this imposter syndrome. So in November, LinkedIn has this thing about top voices in India. So I won top voices in India, which was nice and sweet. And then LinkedIn writes to me that I have won top 10 authors in banking and finance all over the world. Okay. I was like, excuse me? And they're like, you're the only other Indian who's won in India besides Raghu Ramarajan. And I was like, okay. And I went to my husband and I said, I am a fraud. I said, I write little things that just come to my mind on LinkedIn. And he's Raghu Ramarajan and I am me, right? And I'm just a fraud. And actually didn't tell anyone about it because I was so embarrassed about it. And I think a week after, I won a Fortune Award for like most 40 powerful women, and I was ranked behind Priyanka Chopra. And then I felt like a fraud again. And I told Nalin, she's Priyanka Chopra, and look at me. And then I think him and my mother drilled this advice into me. They're like, if you've got something, you've got it for a reason. And they're special because of what they are, and you're special because of what you are, and what you bring to the table, they don't bring to the table, and vice versa. So stop doubting yourself, and celebrate what you are. And I think the message from the story is that it's important to have your unique voice and retain your unique voice. Perfections, imperfections, stupidities, whatever it is, and you'll get recognized for that as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think this has been really, really interesting, and obviously I can go on and on, but I think must value your time as well. Especially, I'm sure you're very sought after on the International Women's Day. But thank you for doing this with us. And look forward to chatting up with you maybe on another interesting topic sometime in the near future. And on behalf of all Sqrrl users, and also in behalf of everybody who's going to be tuning in to watch this, a big thank you for pouring your heart out and not being an imposter. And I'll tell you, I was taking my notes while we were chatting. There are a few things that stood out for me. One, I think you said, you must publicly accept your shortcomings. I think that is the path to success and overcoming any internal fears you have. Two, I think you said must be very ambitious. Don't compromise on being ambitious. I think that is something very, very important. Third, which I never thought about, but I think after this chat today, my mind is sticking on this one. I believe that, post-COVID, I think women empowerment and their space under the sun, this has been a big opportunity rather. And I think it will leapfrog. So I also feel that if we, like you suggested, change our communication, make it better, more relatable with women, we can actually move to that closer than 50% number. And lastly, I think the tip that you talked about is a good old-fashioned chocolate under the wrapper, which is asset allocation. That whatever you may say, fact of the matter is, a good old-fashioned chocolate will never disappoint you. Will always give you a good sugar high when you need it. So, thank you for that, Radhika. Thanks for sparing this time and sharing this with us.
Yeah, good old fashioned chocolate or the old school Hindustani thali, dal, sabzi, roti, and little kheer and chas thrown in. Can't go wrong, right? We've been eating it for generations. No, but it was a pleasure doing this. I
Thank
had
you so
lots
much.
of.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Radhika.
Thanks, Samant.